Is the Samsung Galaxy S7 worth buying in 2021? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hey everybody, this is Andre here covering for Kevin on the Kevin Breeze channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy S7. This phone has definitely been around for a while, being released in March of 2016, but is it worth getting today? Well, we're about to find out. Today you can get this phone unlocked for GSM and Verizon carriers. For more information on price and availability, be sure to check the link in the description. So this phone comes with a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1440p and a PPI of 577. The phone has an aspect ratio of 16:9 and a 72.1% screen-to-body ratio. As you can see, the bezels are definitely quite big by today's standards. At one point, the screen of this phone was considered to be on the bigger side, but nowadays, phones have definitely evolved with bigger screens, smaller bezels, and it just looks a little tiny compared to phones nowadays. The front-facing camera is 5 megapixels. Now back in 2016, this definitely was pretty decent, especially for a flagship phone. But today, even the entry-level smartphones do usually have around a 5 megapixel camera, so this is really nothing out of the ordinary. The phone has 32 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion. Again, in the time that this phone was made, that was pretty impressive. This was a flagship phone, so you would expect it to have the better features. But these days, although the very inexpensive smartphones do have a little bit less storage than this phone, a lot of the entry-level smartphones are going to start out around 32 gigabytes. So again, it's decent, but at the same time, if you use the phone in ways that require a lot of data, then you're going to run out of space real quick. So right now, the phone has everything that I usually use on a daily basis downloaded onto it, and it's taking up over half of the storage on the phone. Now, if you're taking a lot of photos and videos and running larger apps, then you're going to run out of space real fast, and definitely will have to use the microSD card to expand the memory. I personally prefer to just have a lot more internal storage on the phone itself. I don't really like using the microSD card, just because things like apps can't be stored on the microSD card a lot of the time. So I would rather just have it all in one place on the phone itself. This phone is pretty old, so the expectation is kind of low, especially considering the price it's going for these days. But I still tend to say that 64 gigabytes is a lot more reasonable to have as a minimum for the internal storage in this day and age. Now this phone does have wireless charging, which is a really cool thing to have. The entry-level smartphones that I've seen in this price range don't have wireless charging, so that is definitely a plus and an edge that this phone has over those. This phone also has a fingerprint scanner. Now this is around the time of the earlier fingerprint scanners, and this was actually back before manufacturers started doing away with the home button. So the fingerprint scanner, instead of being on the back where you might find other Galaxy fingerprint scanners, it's actually on the front on the home button. Let's give that a try now. Let's try it one more time. As you can see, despite it being a really old phone, the fingerprint scanner is actually really fast and easy to use. Although pretty much no phones nowadays have a setup like this, I personally really like having that home button and having a fingerprint scanner on it. Nowadays, a lot of phones have the on-screen fingerprint scanner, like the Samsung Galaxy A51, for example. I definitely think that this fingerprint scanner is a lot better and more convenient than the S8 and the S9 that have their fingerprint scanners in weird spots. I think the S8 is right here and the one for the S9 is right here. Those ones don't make any sense to me because it's so easy to accidentally touch the camera when you're trying to unlock your phone. But the plus for this phone is, even though it's very old in comparison to a lot of these other phones, the fingerprint scanner is at least in a great place. So taking a look at the camera setup, we have a 12 megapixel rear camera right here, as well as our flash. Now, because this phone is pretty old, it's not going to have a lot of the features that new phones do today. Taking a look at the camera itself, it does have a very decent quality for the photos, but there aren't a lot of features on this camera. Almost every phone nowadays, even the very entry-level ones, do have portrait mode at least, if not an ultra-wide camera. And this phone has neither of those things. So if you're using this phone a lot to take pictures and have specific needs for your photography, like an ultra-wide, or if you really like to get those portrait pictures, then this might not be the device for you, because even though the quality of the camera itself is pretty high, it doesn't have those features. This is the front-facing camera, of course. As you can see, the quality of it is pretty good. It is only 5 megapixels compared to the later models like the Galaxy S8 and the S9 that have an 8 megapixel front-facing camera. So you're not going to get the same quality that you would on those phones. Another thing to note is that there's no portrait mode. So if that's something that is important to you, then you might want to look at a different device. Doing a quick test of the video mode of this device. We are shooting in 4K right now. Also keep in mind the audio quality. As you can see, the video mode of this phone is actually pretty good, and the sound quality, even though the phone is almost 5 years old, is actually pretty impressive. The phone is able to shoot in 4K with the rear camera and 1440p in the front camera, and compared to some of the brand new phones around the same price level as this phone is currently going for, that's pretty impressive because those phones, if they're even able to shoot in 4K at all, are not going to be able to shoot in 4K very well. They're usually limited to around 1080p. So if shooting videos is one thing that you're going to be doing with your device, then this is definitely a plus. Now internally, we're getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it has a single core score of 258 and a multi-core score of 777. These numbers are definitely great compared to the entry-level phones in a similar price range to what this phone is going for now. But compared to other older flagship phones, it's honestly not really that impressive. The LG G6, for example, another one of those older flagship phones, actually does have a slightly higher processing power than this phone. And if processing power is one of the primary concerns for you, then the Samsung Galaxy S8 has a much higher processing power, and the price range of that device is not a whole lot more. But if you're looking to do more moderate activities along with the basic uses of your phone, then this phone might be a good choice for you because right now it's going for around the same price range as those entry-level phones that can do a lot less. But again, if your primary objective is to get a more high-powered device that can do a lot more and has more features, then you might want to look at one of the other older flagship phones that has more capabilities. Now this phone has a 3000 milliamp hour battery that supports 15 watt fast charging. Definitely decent with the battery life, but also keep in mind that this is an older phone. In fact, this phone is pretty old for an older phone for that matter. And you're most likely not going to get the same battery power as a brand new phone that hasn't been used a whole lot yet. Now this phone does run on Android 8 Oreo. Of course, at this age, you're not going to be able to update it. So if getting the latest Android is important to you, then you might want to look at a different device. Now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a look at the hardware. So up top, we got the slot for the micro SD card and the SIM card. And then right here, there's a noise canceling microphone. We got our front facing camera right here, and of course our earpiece. There's also a Samsung logo at the top. I gotta say, compared to phones made these days, these bezels are huge. Right here, we got a button that basically pulls up all the apps that are open, the home button, and a back button. And then at the bottom, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack, a micro USB charging port, a microphone, and the speaker. Yeah, this phone was made before USB-C started really becoming a thing. And then of course on the back, we have our camera and our flash. All around, the materials of the phone feel very high-end, but at the same time, this phone feels really old. You can definitely tell, even just by looking at it, the design is very dated and it does not feel like a new sleek phone at all. It's not too thick and it definitely doesn't feel bad, but at the same time, if you're looking for a phone that has a newer, sleeker feel, then this is definitely not going to be it, because this phone is old and you can definitely tell. The back is made of a glossy black material, and this material is really nice because fingerprints don't really show up at all. So that is definitely a plus for this phone. Now in conclusion, is this phone worth buying in 2021? I personally don't think so. Even though these phones, especially Samsung's, are built to last, there comes a point where it's just too old. This phone definitely has a more outdated version of Android. You're not going to be able to update it. When you get it, the battery life is most likely going to be more questionable because it's been around for a while. It's not going to have the same strength as a brand new phone. If you're looking for a phone that has a higher processing power and is able to run larger apps and do all that kind of stuff, then there are older flagship phones that are a lot better than this one for not that much more. But if you're just using the phone for basic activities like making calls, sending text messages, doing some light web browsing and social media use and that sort of thing, then the processing power of this phone is not really going to be very beneficial, and you're going to be able to get a newer phone for the same price that's more reliable and might have some better features that weren't around when this phone was released. Again, if you're looking for a more performance-oriented phone, you might want to look into a phone like the LG G6 or the Samsung Galaxy S8 or S9 that are around the same price range but have a lot better performance specs. In fact, the LG G6 was actually one of the first phones to implement the ultra-wide camera feature. The point is, if you're looking for a higher performance phone, there are definitely better options out there for a very similar price. And if you're not really looking for a performance-oriented phone, then you're most likely going to benefit more from just getting a newer phone that's more entry level. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.